When we talk about reproductive technologies, we're stepping into this world where incredible, cutting-edge science meets some of our most personal, most fundamental decisions. So how do we figure out what's right, or what's safe, what's ethical? Today, we're going to break down the really complex balancing act that's needed to evaluate these powerful tools. All right, let's just dive right in with a question for you. Imagine a new procedure is 99% successful. I mean, that sounds amazing, right? A total no-brainer. You hear that number and you immediately think, sign me up. But what if I told you that number is really only the very beginning of the story? And that's because it all comes down to this huge, really common misconception that if the science works, if that success rate is sky high, then of course we should use the technology. But the reality, well, it's so much more complicated than that. The data is absolutely crucial, don't get me wrong, but it's just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. So, let's start with that first piece of the puzzle, the scientific evidence. Before we can even begin to debate the ethics or the impact on society, we first have to understand what the technology can actually do and just how well it does it. A proper scientific evaluation is all about being objective. It's about looking at the tech and figuring out two core things. Is it effective and is it safe? And to do that, scientists and doctors have to rely on cold, hard data. They track everything from the initial success all the way to the long-term consequences for both the parents and their children. But here's the thing. Success isn't just one single number. To get the real picture, you have to break it down. We're not just looking at a general success rate. We're asking much smarter questions, like what's the actual pregnancy rate versus the live birth rate? What are the potential side effects or complications down the line? All these little details give us a much clearer, more honest understanding of what success really looks like in the real world. And this brings us to such a critical point. Data is never, ever one size fits all. Take something like IVF, for example. A clinic may advertise a fantastic overall success rate, but that's just an average. For you as an individual, that number can change dramatically based on your own biology, especially your age. As egg quality naturally declines over time, so do the chances of success. It just goes to show you how even the hardest science is still deeply, deeply personal. Okay, so let's move on to the next section and see how this all connects. Because once you've got all the scientific facts laid out, you run straight into a wall of really complex human and moral questions. And this is the question, isn't it? It's the big pivot. Science tells us what's possible. It gives us the amazing capability. But ethics asks us to stop and consider our responsibility. Just because a technology exists and it's really effective, does that automatically mean it's the right thing to do? And you simply can't separate these ethical factors from the technology itself. We have to think about things like informed consent. We have to ask tough questions about access and equity, like who can even afford these technologies? And then you get into these deeply personal and societal questions about the moral status of embryos and how all of this lines up with different cultural values and religious beliefs. It's a minefield. This quote just sums it all up perfectly. Biological knowledge informs our path. It's like it gives us the map and shows us the terrain ahead, but it doesn't dictate our destination. Ultimately, our values and our ethics, that's the compass that guides the final decision. So we've looked at the science and the ethics for the individual, but now we've got to zoom out and look at the third critical layer here, the societal ripple effect, because none of these decisions happen in a vacuum. Of course, every choice a family makes about reproduction is deeply personal. But when you multiply that one choice by millions and millions of people, it starts to create these powerful demographic trends. It's easy to think these technologies only affect individuals, but in reality, they end up shaping the very structure of our populations. And here is a perfect, really stark example of that ripple effect in action. In developed countries where access to contraception is pretty widespread, we tend to see lower birth rates. But in regions where that access is limited, populations can grow incredibly fast. So this one technology, or the lack of it, has a massive impact on demographics on a global scale. So why does this matter? Well, because understanding these huge population-level trends is absolutely essential for good governance. It allows societies to actually plan ahead, to figure out future needs for healthcare, for schools, for how we're going to distribute resources. It turns personal biology into public policy. Okay, so we've got the science, the ethics, and the societal impact. Whew, that is a lot to juggle, right? So how do we put it all together to make responsible choices? Well, let's look at a framework that can help. Here's the key takeaway. Responsible progress isn't about choosing one of these things over the others. It's not science versus ethics. It's all about finding the right balance between all three of them, making sure that our amazing technological leaps forward actually align with our human values and what society really needs. A structured framework like this one helps us do just that. So first, you clearly identify the biological issue you're trying to solve. Second, you look at all the available technologies that could address it. Third, you carefully, and I mean carefully, evaluate the scientific evidence, the effectiveness, the risks, all of it. And finally, you pull in all those ethical and societal factors we've been talking about. And the beauty of following a clear step-by-step process like this is that it makes sure our decisions aren't just based on a gut feeling or a single shiny statistic. They become logical, they become transparent, and most importantly, they stay grounded in both solid scientific fact and our shared human values. And that really brings us to our final thought here. The pace of scientific discovery, it is not slowing down. We are going to be constantly faced with new possibilities, new technologies we can't even dream of yet. And so the ultimate question for all of us isn't just what can we create, but what kind of world do we want to create with it? Now that's the balance we'll always need to find.